no secret that mid-range smartphones are becoming the better choice for most people through providing only the core elements of a flagship and leaving the gimmicks behind. And this is the X3 SuperZoom from Realme, and it's not only in my opinion one of the most overachieving mid-rangers out there, but it could also be one of the best value smartphones on the market right now. Let me explain why. So for that £470 price tag, there's quite a lot of flagship features present. It has a Snapdragon 855 Plus, 12GB of RAM and 256GB of storage. And all of that adds up to one pretty impressive finished experience, which no matter what I seem to throw at it, from basic single tasks to heavier social networking use, seems to hold up great. Most of my time on my phone is spent either in social networks, listening to music, or watching something on YouTube or Netflix, and the best way I can describe multitasking and the general use of this phone is just responsive. Having used this phone daily for the past few weeks, it feels like there's more than enough performance overhead for the long term, so you won't ever need to be upgrading soon. Apps open up with unhesitating speed, multitasking is slick, and just in general the entire experience of using this phone feels like it should cost a lot more than it does. Side by side with my iPhone 11, the speeds are shockingly similar, and although the similarity doesn't carry through to every use case out there, it's still pretty impressive. For the price, the performance of this phone is incredible, and more importantly, it's consistent too. Holding and using the Realme X3 is pretty good, but it's also clear that this is one of the areas that has been cut down to accommodate that lower price. The weight distribution is perfectly fine, and the phone isn't too heavy or too light, but its fully plastic edges don't feel the nicest when combined with the glass back. But for durability's sake, plastic is great. And if it means you can pay less for a phone without losing anything that's that significant, then that's fine by me. There's something about the way that the light bounces off the rear of this phone that's almost psychedelic in nature. It's sort of a hazy tint of orange and blue, and it creates some really great patterns when under direct light, and some subtle glows depending on the ambient light. There's not many phones that are quite as eye-catching as this one, and I love the aesthetic created here. As the name may have indicated, one of the main selling points of this phone is its cameras, and for the most part I think they're pretty good. That main 64 megapixel sensor is decent for almost all situations, and although it can be a little noisy at times, more noticeably in challenging situations, it's a solid shooter that I'm pretty happy to use daily, even in its normal 16 megapixel quality. The details at 64 megapixels are really impressive, and it gives you the freedom to crop in or alter your framing after the fact. But it's unfortunate that you can't do 64 megapixel portrait photos. That's something that I would have loved to have seen. The 112 degree wide angle camera is okay, but it's only 8 megapixels and it lacks what I usually describe as character. Colours look good enough with a nice level of saturation and warmth, but it seems like the exposure is consistently lower with the wide camera, and the noise levels are weirdly high. What Realme calls 30x zoom is actually just 5x optical with a 6x digital crop on top. And I get it, that is just typical advertiser talk, but if you want a remotely usable photo, then just stick to the 5x zoom. Generally speaking, the telephoto camera is decent, it's not exactly eye-catching or anything special, but it'll be good enough for pretty much most situations, provided you're not expecting something amazing. Displays are arguably the most important part of a smartphone, and this phone's 120Hz LCD panel leaves only a little bit to be desired. As with any LCD, a dual camera cutout is going to have some edge fading, and that's something that kind of ruins this display a little bit for me because it can get quite strong. But that being said, it's a full 120Hz with an excellent peak brightness, and thin enough bezels to not be noticeable in daily use. 1080 by 2400 is more than good enough of a screen resolution for this size, and I haven't once noticed pixels even at stupidly close distances. When it comes to actually using this display with all the numbers and figures put to the side, it's one really enjoyable display that I honestly couldn't ask for more from. For reading the news, watching Netflix or YouTube, or literally anything in between, it's pleasant throughout. It might not be the most jaw-dropping or colour accurate display on the planet, but that doesn't matter as much as it may seem to on paper. At the end of the day, I really enjoy using this display. Realme's version of Android is known as Realme UI, and it's pretty much stock Android 10 with a few customized elements, like the notification shade, volume pop-up, and settings app. The rest of it feels almost entirely like stock Android does, which works really well with this phone's hardware. Realme UI pays a lot of attention to the little details without adding any in-your-face customizations that they were previously known for. Now it's all about the user experience being clean, and it achieves that well. It doesn't feel like an off-brand of Android, it feels like a well-rounded division of it. The stock launcher is essentially the Pixel launcher, but without the Pixel name. And the same goes for the phone app and the messages app, these are the stock Google ones. But don't get me mistaken, this is not the perfect revision of Android, and there's a few things that really highlight that. It's things like the smart sidebar that feel as though they don't have a place here, or as if they had the potential to be useful, but in reality they're just not. It doesn't really fit in with its clunky animations and honestly limited use case, but thankfully it's an optional feature so it can be disabled easily. Things like that smart sidebar and the default animation speed when you open and close an app, as stock, are just terrible. Personally, I'm not a fan of that ridiculous looking speed, so you can set it quite easily in the settings to just a normal speed, and finally it looks smooth and like it was intended to open this way. Don't get me wrong, this phone is seriously fast, but you shouldn't sacrifice the overall polish in favour of a marginally faster feeling experience. You know, I really wasn't expecting quite as good of a software experience from this phone. From the wallpapers that seem to bring out the best of the display to the really satisfying flat look that seems to be everywhere, I really like the software experience on this phone. It seems like everyone is focusing on security these days, and along with the secure environment mode that this phone has for your banking apps, the biometrics are another way that this phone maintains security. I've never been a fan of side-mounted fingerprint scanners, and this is no exception, but the face unlock works really great. As a power button, the fingerprint scanner is good, but for fingerprint recognition, it's simply too thin to get a reliable and quick reading done with such a small button. As for the face unlock, no, it's not the world's most secure facial unlocking software out there, but it works incredibly quickly and it gets a solid reading pretty much every time, even in lower lighting conditions, which is pretty impressive. You can get unlocked easily without fussing and finding the registered portion of your finger, and the sleek little animation around the cameras feels so natural that it seems like this phone just needs to use facial unlocking software. An area in which this phone really shines is its battery optimizations. Not only do you have manual options for background app killing and general performance modes, there's also additional options for power saving when you're asleep, as well as power options for smart display modes, which alter the animations and display effects that you may experience. I keep my X3 at 120Hz all of the time, and battery life is pretty good throughout, but there's definitely ways to extend it. But as I'm never really in need of an extension for this battery, why not use the full power? Now there is a lot of great stuff with this phone. Its display is just outstanding for the price, the level of customization in the software that carries through from the home screen to all of the other stock elements, those are great. And the emphasis that Realme have put on leaving absolutely nothing out from this phone really sums it up. There's so much great stuff on this phone that you almost forget about the average cameras and the plastic build. Instead, your focus is drawn on the value for money here. If you're like me and you've probably never considered a Realme phone, then maybe this is the time to change it. The X3 SuperZoom is one seriously impressive phone.